The desert stretched endlessly, quiet under the dying light of dusk, when Thomas Reed arrived near Marfa, Texas, his old truck rattling like a weary beast. He stepped out, adjusting his jacket against the cool air, and gazed across the vast horizon, where the earth met the fading sun. The first whispers of night rolled in, carrying with them a silence that was both heavy and alive. Thomas thought of the stories he had read. Strange lights flickering in the desert sky, tales told by ranchers and wanderers. Evelyn Carter said, "You're chasing ghost lanterns, Thomas, nothing more." But his eyes refused to blink as the first faint shimmer appeared far off, glowing like a candle flame refusing to die. The moment felt unreal, as if the desert had drawn him here for this exact hour. Determination tightened in his chest. He whispered to himself, "This is where the truth begins." The wind carried the smell of dust and dry sage, as Thomas walked further from the truck, each step crunching against gravel. Evelyn called out, "Stay close, the ground isn't safe out there." He waved her warning aside, his eyes fixed on the horizon, unwilling to let the strange glow escape him. The desert was alive with shadows, twisting against the fading twilight. His notebook rustled under his arm, his fingers twitching, as if the lights might vanish before he could understand them. The silence was broken by the sudden cry of a distant coyote, sharp and haunting, amplifying the tension. Evelyn muttered under her breath, "This place doesn't want us here." But Thomas pressed on, drawn as though invisible strings pulled him deeper into the night. Thomas stopped at a ridge, pulling out his binoculars, the cold metal pressing against his skin as he scanned the horizon. The lights shimmered erratically, now brighter, then gone as if teasing him. Evelyn shouted from behind, "It's a mirage, Thomas, tricks of heat and distance." He ignored her voice, his breathing slow, steady, focused. The desert silence pressed harder, broken only by his heart pounding in his ears. He scribbled in his notebook quickly, his handwriting jagged from the trembling in his hand. His obsession carved itself into every line. He whispered, "No mirage dances like this." The glow split into two, moving apart, weaving across the horizon in defiance of logic. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn climbed up the ridge, her boots scraping against stone, frustration painted across her face. She said, "You're losing yourself in shadows, Thomas." He turned, his expression sharp, eyes burning with conviction. The lights flickered again, this time closer, brighter, almost tangible. For a moment both stood in silence, their faces lit faintly by the eerie glow. Evelyn whispered, "They're real," her voice cracked with disbelief. Thomas gripped her arm, whispering fiercely, "Now you see why I'm here." The desert stretched endlessly behind them, the horizon glowing with secrets. The weight of centuries of mystery pressed against their chests, pulling them into its hidden heart. The glow danced across the sand, shifting colors like molten metal, silver one moment, gold the next. Thomas moved closer, eyes locked, breath shallow, as though stepping into a sacred revelation. Evelyn stood frozen, torn between fear and awe. The desert air vibrated faintly, humming with an energy that felt alive. He whispered, "This is no myth. This is science waiting to be uncovered." Evelyn shook her head, whispering, "Or something we shouldn't disturb." The lights brightened, then suddenly vanished into the horizon as if swallowed by the night. Silence crushed them, heavier than before. The desert returned to its stillness, but the echo of the lights burned inside Thomas, refusing to fade. The morning sun burned hot over the desert town, streets empty except for dust swirling like restless spirits. Thomas Reed sat at a small cafe, notebook open, replaying the lights in his mind. Evelyn Carter stirred her coffee with impatient circles, eyes scanning the locals, as if searching for answers herself. A shadow fell over their table as Dr. Marcus Hale approached, a man whose reputation carried both brilliance and suspicion. Hale said, "You're stirring things best left buried, Reed." Thomas met his gaze, refusing to blink, the tension between them thick as the desert heat. Evelyn muttered softly, "Here we go." The cafe air turned heavy, as if walls themselves pressed closer. Hale's calm voice carried weight, but beneath it Thomas heard something else, fear disguised as warning. Dr. Hale lowered himself into the chair opposite Thomas, his movements deliberate, controlled, like a man who knew the power he held in silence. He said, "Those lights are not your concern. Curiosity invites ruin." Thomas leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Truth is never ruin. It is the only cure." Evelyn's hand brushed his sleeve, urging restraint, but his eyes locked on Hale's with unshaken defiance. The cafe clatter around them blurred into distant noise as tension built like a storm. Hale's lips curled faintly, more menace than smile. He whispered, "You have no idea the forces you tamper with." The words carried both warning and threat, sinking into Thomas like hooks. Evelyn's breath caught, the air dense with unspoken danger. After Hale left, silence lingered like smoke, choking the space he vacated. Thomas scribbled furiously in his notebook, words tearing into paper like a blade. Evelyn whispered, "He's dangerous, Thomas. You saw it in his eyes." Thomas snapped the notebook shut, his determination unbroken. "Danger only hides the truth," he said. Evelyn's gaze softened, worry shadowing her features. She muttered, "You're going to drag us into something we can't escape." Thomas stood pushing back his chair with sharp scrape, eyes scanning the street as though expecting Hale's shadow to reappear. The town seemed quieter now, as if it too had heard the warning. Yet the memory of the lights flared inside him, refusing to be silenced. That evening, Thomas sat on the edge of a motel bed, neon light from a flickering sign bleeding red and blue across his face. Evelyn paced the small room, frustration mounting. She said, "You think Hale just warns strangers for fun? He knows something. He's protecting it." Thomas tightened his grip on the notebook, his voice steady. "Then that means I'm close." The hum of the neon mixed with the rattling of the old air conditioner, creating a restless noise. Evelyn stopped, facing him with sharp glare. "Or it means you're walking into a trap." Thomas didn't respond, his silence louder than words. The desert night pressed against the thin walls, as though listening to their struggle. Later that night, Thomas stood outside the motel, desert wind tugging at his jacket as stars filled the sky. The silence was cut by Hale's voice from the shadows. "You should have left it alone." Thomas spun, finding the older man watching from the edge of darkness, his face half hidden, his posture calm yet predatory. Hale continued, "The desert swallows men who chase illusions." Thomas replied, voice low, "Then I'll let it swallow me with truth in my hands." Hale's expression hardened, the mask slipping enough for fear to flicker beneath. He stepped back into shadows, his form dissolving into the night. Thomas's pulse raced, but his resolve grew sharper. The lights had enemies, but so did lies. The library smelled of dust and old secrets, rows of worn books stretching like silent witnesses. Thomas Reed pushed through the heavy door, determination in his step, while Evelyn Carter followed reluctantly. At a corner desk sat Professor Samuel Grayson, a man with weathered features and eyes that carried too much knowledge. He looked up, adjusting his spectacles with slow precision. Grayson said, "You shouldn't be here, Reed. This path brings nothing but ruin." Thomas's voice cut firmly. "I need answers and you have them." Evelyn crossed her arms, muttering, "At least someone sees the danger." The professor sighed deeply, the sound carrying weight of years of warnings unheeded. Still, his hand brushed over an old map spread before him, betraying his reluctance with curiosity. Professor Grayson leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled as though weighing his words. "The lights are older than this town," he said. "Some call them spirits. Others say science. But no one survives chasing them." Thomas stepped closer, eyes burning with defiance. "I don't intend to survive myths. I intend to break them." Evelyn's voice cut in sharply. "And if the myths break you?" Grayson's eyes narrowed, the old man torn between silence and revelation. He finally whispered, "There are patterns. Times when they appear, places where they gather." Thomas's pulse quickened, notebook ready in his grip. The professor's warning carried both temptation and dread, his words carving deeper paths into Thomas's obsession. Grayson unrolled another map. Edges frayed, lines marked with circles and scribbled notes. He tapped one spot with trembling finger. "Here, near the ridge. I've seen them myself, but not without cost." His voice shook with memory, hinting at scars unseen. Thomas leaned over, his voice low. "What did it cost you?" Grayson's silence answered more than words, his eyes shifting away, heavy with something unsaid. Evelyn whispered, "He's trying to save you, Thomas." Thomas ignored her, copying symbols into his notebook with frantic urgency. Grayson muttered, "If you go against my warning. The desert chooses what it shows and what it keeps." The tension thickened, knowledge given reluctantly, dangerous yet irresistible. The clock in the library struck softly, echoing across the empty halls, and Grayson's expression hardened. "If you insist on this, there's no turning back," he said. Thomas met his eyes with steady resolve. "I turned back long ago, now I move forward." Evelyn shook her head, frustration spilling over. "You're both speaking like the desert decides our fate, not us." Grayson whispered, "Perhaps it does." He slid the map toward Thomas, his reluctant choice made. The paper crackled with age as Thomas gripped it tightly, eyes blazing with gratitude and hunger. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the professor, silently pleading for reassurance, but he looked away. The moment marked an alliance born not of trust, but necessity. Outside the library, the sky deepened to dusk, painting the town in hues of violet and orange. Thomas clutched the map tightly, every step fueled by obsession. Evelyn walked beside him, her silence heavy, her eyes filled with worry she could no longer voice. She finally said, "You think knowledge makes you stronger, but sometimes it just binds you tighter." Thomas didn't answer. His jaw set, gaze fixed on horizon. The wind carried desert dust between them, whispering of secrets still hidden. He whispered to himself, "Grayson gave me what I needed. Now the desert will answer." Evelyn's heart sank, sensing he was already lost in pursuit of something greater than either of them. The lights waited, and so did danger. The desert wind howled low as Thomas Reed and Evelyn Carter followed the map toward the ridge. Shadows lengthened, stretching like fingers across the sand. At the trail's bend, a man emerged from the haze. Daniel Cross, an old acquaintance Thomas never expected here. His smile was warm, but his eyes glittered with calculation. "Thomas," he greeted, voice smooth, "I heard you were searching where you shouldn't." Evelyn's shoulders tensed, sensing unease beneath his charm. Thomas narrowed his gaze, suspicion muted by memory of old trust. Daniel continued, "Maybe I can help you. I know things about the lights, things no map will show." The offer hung like bait in the dry air, laced with both promise and threat. Daniel walked beside them with ease, his steps confident, as if the desert itself welcomed him. "These lights are no mystery to me," he said, voice smooth. "I've studied them for years." Thomas asked sharply, "Why now? Why here?" Daniel's chuckle carried no humor. "Because you finally crossed the line from curiosity into danger." Evelyn frowned, muttering, "And you just appear with answers?" Daniel looked at her briefly, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes truths arrive only when you're ready to hear them." Thomas's grip tightened on the map, torn between suspicion and the familiar comfort of Daniel's steady voice. Yet beneath the calm unease gnawed at the edges of trust. At the ridgetop, Daniel gestured toward the horizon, where faint glimmers pulsed in the distance. "They follow patterns," he said. "But they're not random. Someone controls them." Thomas's breath caught, doubt battling awe. Evelyn whispered, "Controlled? By who?" Daniel's smile widened, too polished to be sincere. "That's what you came here to learn, and I can lead you closer than Grayson ever dared." Thomas's chest tightened, memories of trust clashing with instincts screaming caution. The lights flickered again, brighter now, as if answering Daniel's words. For the first time, Evelyn stepped forward, eyes fixed on Daniel. "Why help us? What's in it for you?" His silence said more than his smile, leaving only unease. Night settled fast, stars spilling across the desert sky as Daniel lit a lantern, its glow painting his features in warm gold. He said, "You need guidance, and I can give it. But understand this, the truth isn't free." Thomas asked quietly, "What's your price?" Daniel's eyes gleamed with something unspoken. "Loyalty. Trust me, and I'll take you where the lights reveal themselves fully." Evelyn's jaw clenched, voice sharp. Trust earned through shadows is no trust at all. Thomas's silence stretched, torn between old bonds and present danger. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Sometimes survival requires following those you least trust." The desert air felt heavier, the night alive with unspoken bargains. Later, as the lantern dimmed, Thomas and Evelyn stood apart from Daniel, voices hushed. Evelyn said, "He's hiding something. You can see it, Thomas." His eyes remained fixed on Daniel, who leaned casually against a rock, too comfortable in the night's silence. Thomas whispered, "Yes, but he also knows more than anyone else." The air carried the faint hum again, that strange vibration felt when the lights appeared. In the distance, glowing orbs shimmered briefly, vanishing before certainty could claim them. Evelyn touched Thomas's arm, voice softer now. "Don't let him pull you under." Thomas exhaled slowly, torn between loyalty and suspicion, whispering, "I already feel the ground shifting." The desert held its secrets tighter, the line between friend and enemy blurring. The desert night gave way to pale dawn as Thomas Reed, Evelyn Carter, and Daniel Cross reached a forgotten homestead near the ridge. The wood was splintered, windows broken, a relic swallowed by time. Sitting on the porch was Clara Dawson, her eyes hollow yet piercing, a woman weathered by grief. She whispered, "I've seen the lights my whole life, and they've taken everything from me." Thomas stepped forward carefully, notebook ready, his voice steady. "Tell me what they took." Clara's lips trembled. "My brother vanished in that desert. He followed the glow, and he never returned." Evelyn lowered her gaze, sensing the depth of loss. Daniel's face remained unreadable, though his eyes lingered too long on Clara's pain. Clara's hands shook as she clutched an old photograph, edges worn, image fading with years. She said he was only 20. That night, the lights came closer than ever. He swore they called his name. Thomas leaned closer, voice hushed. "Did you see them too?" Clara nodded, tears gathering. "I begged him not to go, but he followed the glow into the desert, and the night swallowed him whole." Evelyn's breath caught, grief echoing through her chest. Daniel finally spoke, voice smooth yet cold. "Some are chosen, some are taken." Clara's gaze snapped to him, fury and sorrow colliding. "Don't speak like you understand." The pain in her voice cut through the morning stillness, leaving silence raw and heavy. Inside the ruined homestead, dust floated in beams of early light. Clara pointed to a chest against the wall, her voice fragile. "He left his journal. I never had the courage to read it." Thomas opened the chest, lifting a worn leather book. The pages crackled with time, ink faded, but words still alive. Evelyn whispered, "This could explain everything." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. "Or it could destroy me all over again." Thomas flipped through, eyes widening at sketches of glowing orbs and frantic notes of voices heard in the desert wind. Daniel hovered behind, gaze fixed on the pages, hunger flashing briefly in his expression. Clara's pain filled the room, making every word heavier. Thomas read aloud fragments of the journal, his voice unsteady. "The lights speak in whispers. They promise something beyond death." Clara broke, her hands covering her face as sobs shook her frame. Evelyn knelt beside her, murmuring softly, "You don't have to relive this." Daniel stepped forward, his voice laced with urgency. "This journal proves the lights are more than myth. It's a key." Thomas's eyes flickered between obsession and empathy, torn between pursuing truth and honoring Clara's grief. She cried, "If you follow his path, you'll vanish too." The journal trembled in Thomas's hands, its weight more than paper and ink. The room held both revelation and despair, each heartbeat louder than the last. As the sun rose higher, Clara led them to the edge of her property, where the desert stretched endless. She pointed toward the ridge, her voice breaking. "That's where I last saw him, chasing the glow." The silence of the desert swallowed her words, leaving only the ache of loss. Thomas placed a hand gently on her shoulder, whispering, "Your pain is now part of this truth." Evelyn's eyes glistened, torn between sympathy and fear of what lay ahead. Daniel watched with unnerving calm, hands tucked in his pockets. Clara turned away, whispering, "The desert doesn't give back what it takes." Her sorrow hung heavy in the rising heat, a warning etched in grief. The desert night stretched vast and endless, stars scattered like shattered glass across the sky. Thomas Reed walked ahead, clutching the journal, Evelyn Carter close behind, her silence heavy with unease. Daniel Cross lingered a few steps back, his presence too calm for the hour. From the shadows of a rocky outcrop, a figure emerged. Jonas Blackwood, cloaked in dust, his gaze piercing and unreadable. His voice rasped like gravel. "You seek the lights, but they are not yours to claim." Thomas froze, suspicion flaring. Evelyn whispered, "Who is he?" Jonas stepped closer, lantern light catching his weathered face. "A messenger," he said, "sent to warn you that truth will cost more than you're willing to pay." Jonas set the lantern on the ground, its glow flickering across the sand like restless fire. He said, "The lights do not guide. They lure. They feed on those who chase too close." Thomas stepped forward, voice firm. "Then you know what they are." Jonas shook his head slowly. "I know only what they take." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Why warn us? Why now?" Jonas's eyes lingered on her, sorrow deep within. "Because I've walked this path before. I lost everything to them." Daniel folded his arms, unimpressed. "Stories don't stop the truth." Jonas's gaze sharpened, locking onto Daniel. "And lies don't protect you from it." The tension bristled in the cold desert air. Jonas pulled a weathered satchel from his shoulder, unrolling brittle parchment covered in strange symbols. He whispered, "These markings show where the lights gather, but every circle marks someone lost." Thomas studied the symbols, hunger for knowledge clashing with fear. Evelyn touched his arm, voice pleading, "Don't let obsession blind you." Daniel leaned in, eyes gleaming. "This could be the map we've needed." Jonas' stare hardened. "It's not a guide. It's a graveyard." The firelight flickered across their faces, shadows painting them in conflict. Thomas whispered, "Then maybe the truth lies buried among the dead." The night wind howled, carrying his words into the emptiness. The lantern sputtered, shadows dancing wildly as Jonas' voice dropped lower. "They come when fear is strongest, when loss cuts deepest. The lights know your heart." Evelyn whispered, trembling, "Then why do they appear to us?" Jonas's eyes softened, sorrow etched deep. "Because you carry grief, whether you admit it or not." Thomas flinched, the weight of his past pressing hard. Daniel smirked. "Or maybe they come because we call them." Jonas stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Mock what you cannot control, and the desert will silence you." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum on the horizon, a warning of the lights themselves. Jonas lifted the lantern high, pointing toward the horizon, where faint orbs shimmered like restless souls. His voice carried like a chant. "There is knowledge in the glow, but none who chase it remain unchanged." Thomas's jaw tightened, obsession warring with dread. Evelyn whispered, "We should walk away." Daniel's eyes burned with eagerness, his tone defiant. "We walk toward it. That's why we're here." Jonas' face fell into shadow as he muttered, "Then the desert has already chosen your fate." The lights pulsed brighter, glowing against the star-filled sky, as though listening. Thomas's heart pounded, pulled by the mystery, caught between warnings and the siren call of truth. The desert ridge loomed under a sky thick with stars, the silence broken only by the hum of unseen energy. Thomas Reed stood at the edge, journal clutched like scripture, Evelyn Carter gripping his arm in fear. Daniel Cross paced with restless confidence, eyes locked on the glowing horizon. Jonas Blackwood's lantern flickered low, casting trembling shadows across his face. He whispered, "This is the point of no return." Thomas's voice rang steady. "Then, this is where truth waits." The orbs of light shimmered closer, weaving through the darkness like restless souls. Evelyn's voice cracked, "Thomas, please." But he stepped forward, each footfall pulling him deeper into the unknown. The light surged, colors shifting from silver to blood red, bathing the desert in an eerie glow. Evelyn gasped, shielding her eyes, while Daniel stepped forward with arms open, as if welcoming them. He shouted, "Do you see? They answer me." Jonas growled, "You fool, they consume, not bless." Thomas's heart pounded, torn between fascination and dread. The journal shook in his hands, its pages fluttering in the wind. Evelyn cried, "Daniel, stop!" But Daniel only laughed, his silhouette outlined against the blazing glow. Thomas whispered, the deceiver revealed, his voice heavy with realization. Daniel's grin faltered, but it was too late. The lights closed in, surrounding them with living fire. The lights pulsed faster, spinning around Daniel, their glow pressing against the air like heat and thunder. He screamed, "They've chosen me!" But the sound warped, twisting into silence. Evelyn clutched Thomas's arm, sobbing, "He's going to vanish like Clara's brother." Jonas' face was pale, whispering, "The desert takes what it claims." Thomas's eyes locked on Daniel, torn between rushing forward and stepping back. Suddenly, Daniel's scream cut short as the orbs tightened, collapsing into him with blinding light. When it faded, the space where he stood was empty, only dust swirling in the glow's retreat. Evelyn buried her face in Thomas's chest, while Jonas closed his eyes in resignation. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Evelyn's sobs and the faint rustle of sand. Thomas whispered he wanted power, and the desert answered. Jonas shook his head slowly. "No. The lights reflect what we bring. Desire, grief, obsession. They take, and they twist." Thomas stared at the horizon, the glow fading, leaving darkness heavier than before. Evelyn lifted her tear-streaked face, voice trembling. "Then why are we still here?" Jonas' lantern sputtered out, plunging them in shadow. "Because the desert hasn't finished with you," he muttered. Thomas's grip on the journal tightened, the weight of both truth and curse pressing into his hands. As dawn broke, the desert stretched quiet and endless once more, painted in hues of gold and rose. Thomas stood at the ridge, eyes hollow but resolute, the journal pressed to his chest. Evelyn stood beside him, her expression weary yet softened, whispering, "We survived, but at what cost?" Jonas, leaning on his staff, answered softly, "The cost of truth is always higher than the lie." The horizon glimmered faintly, as though mocking them with what remained unseen. Thomas's voice was steady, though shadowed. "The lights aren't finished, but neither am I." The desert wind rose, carrying his words into the endless expanse, leaving a haunting promise carved into silence.